Hello everybody, my name is Zen and welcome to my build guide for a fun build that I call the Bloody Corpse Party. It's a variation on a previous build that I made that I just called the Corpse Party, but that build was more for speed farming T13. It also used the Anaria set, and this one uses Tragghouls and is more for Greater Rift farming. Both of them use Corpse Explosion though, and both of them could be adjusted to use Corpse Lance instead. So you could kind of do whatever you want with these builds. They are very flexible and they're very fun. I'll put a link to the previous build in the description and in the comments, so you could take a look at that one if you want. There's a lot of the same stuff in both of these builds. So if you have the Anaria set, you can run that one. But if you have Tragghouls, then you can run this one and try your hand at the Greater Rift pushes. That said, this isn't the best build for the Necromancer. You're not going to see it at the top of the leaderboard, but it's also not going to be that far off from the top of the leaderboard. I think that if you had proper gear and proper gems and everything for this build, you could easily do a 90 to a 95. And considering the current best build for the Necromancer could do upwards of 100, that's pretty good. You know, that's not far off from the best build. And you also are getting a variation on a different kind of play style. So if you're tired of running whatever build everybody else is running on the leaderboard, maybe try this one out and see if this fits your play style instead, especially if you like Corpse Explosion or Corpse Lance. It should also be noted that this is a very high skill cap build. If you like builds where there's a lot of stuff going on and there's a huge margin for screwing up, then this is probably the build for you. If you just want something simple, then I would avoid this. We'll start off by talking about gear, then we'll talk about skills, and then we'll talk about how to actually play this crazy beast of a build. And as always, in the description of this video, I put links so that you can go and see a written version of the same thing as a quick reference, or if you just want to follow along. So let's talk gear. The set we're running is the Tragghoul set. We need 5 pieces of it, plus a Ring of Royal Grandeur. The 5 pieces we want are the helm, the shoulders, the chest, the pants, and the boots. With that in mind, that leaves the glove slot open because we have the Ring of Royal Grandeur, which is giving us our 6-piece bonus, even though we only have 5 pieces. The gloves we want to use is the Moribund Gauntlets. These make it so your golem sheds a corpse every second, which is obviously very good if you're doing things like Corpse Explosion or Corpse Lance. I would say those pieces of gear are really the only non-negotiable pieces in this entire build. You could change anything else as you see fit. But let's talk about amulets. So for your amulet, you're probably going to want to use the Johnstone, though you can change it up as much as you like. The Johnstone is essentially a neck piece that while you have Land of the Dead up and you consume a corpse, it'll give you a stack of Macabre Knowledge, which increases the damage of Corpse Lance or Corpse Explosion by 200% when Land of the Dead is done. So it is a nice burst amount of damage while you have Land of the Dead up because you have infinite corpses, and then directly afterwards you have really strong Corpse Lances and Corpse Explosions because of the stacks from the Johnstone. As for rings, you're gonna want to use the Kreisbin Sentence. This is just a really, really good ring, but if you don't want to use it, a Compass Rose and a Traveler's Pledge could be your options there. But the Kreisbin Sentence essentially means that you do 100% increased damage to things that are slowed, which in almost every scenario here is going to be 100% of the time. And then you do triple the bonus to things that are any other control of pairing effect. So, you know, stun, for example. We also know that you're going to want a Ring of Royal Grandeur. If you have a good one, you can wear it. Otherwise, you could put it in the cube. And the other ring that is pretty good that I suggest, but is another optional thing, is Lornell's Sunstone. This ring is a really unique type of damage reduction we haven't seen before in the game, and it's pretty fun to use, but it is not necessary. You could run a Unity instead, and the Unity will be a smoother damage reduction curve, but Lornell's Sunstone is really cool because a lot of the time running Tragghouls, you're at low health, and this just gives you exceptional damage reduction while you're at low health. The problem is, if you are at max health, you get hit by something really hard, you don't have that damage reduction yet, so it's going to do a huge amount of damage to you. So you gotta kind of know how to play with your health pool. If this is too complicated, just run a Unity. Otherwise, I think Lornell's is a bit better when using Tragghouls. For additional damage reduction on belts, you can run Dainty's Binding, which again is very good. You gain an additional 50% damage reduction while there's an enemy afflicted by Decrepify. and you're going to be running Decrepify for additional damage reduction, so you kind of get a good boost out of this. You can also run String of Ears or any other type of belt that you want. Again, this stuff is pretty much open to whatever you want to run and whatever you seem to have, but Dainty's Binding, for me, seemed to be the most consistent damage reduction. For the Bracer slot, you pretty much run whatever you need to run. So, for example, I don't have any passive generation on Essence, and you do spend Essence with this build between Bone Armor and whatever curse you're running. And because of that, I run out of Essence, so I run Reaper's Wraps to give me my resource back anytime I pick up a health globe, which is a lot of the time I'm picking up health globes. You kind of adjust for whatever you need. So if you need more damage reduction, Ancient Parthan Defenders is pretty good. Gives you more damage reduction based on how many nearby stunned enemies there are. And then there's also things like Nemesis Bracers, which anytime you hit a pylon, it will spawn a rare group, which can be very, very good. For your weapons, you'll want to run one of two different weapons, either Rylena Shadowhook, which is a very, very good two-handed weapon, or Trag'Oul's Corroded Fang. Ideally, you put Trag'Oul's Corroded Fang, which is a one-handed weapon, in your cube, but if you get a really good roll on one, you can wear it and then just use whatever offhand you want. Literally any offhand works, as long as it boosts your damage and damage reduction. We want to use Rylena Shadowhook because it's a pretty good damage boost based on how much max essence we have, so we kind of want to keep that in mind, get as much max essence as possible because it'll just give us flat damage percentage bonus. And then with Trag'Oul's Corroded Fang, we don't care about the effect with Curse Scythe or Grim Scythe because we're not using those. Instead, we care about the effect that it gives us 200% increased damage to enemies that are cursed. And again, wear whichever one you have that is better, put the other one in the cube. For the armor slot in the cube, you'll want to run Grasps of Essence, which increases the damage of Corpse Explosion by 100%, stacking up to 5 times for 6 seconds anytime you hit an enemy with Corpse Explosion, which is almost always. But if you want to run the Corpse Lance version of this build, run the Corpse Lance Shoulders. The Corpse Whisper Pauldrons are so good if you want to run Corpse Lance, and they're the only item you need to swap out if you want to switch between Corpse Lance or Corpse Explosion. This one slot in the cube is either going to be your gloves or the shoulders. That's all that you're moving around. Because of this, it's really nice to have a build that is very flexible. You can switch between Corpse Lance or Corpse Explosion based on what you see fit. Corpse Lance is going to be really good at taking single target enemies down, killing Rift Guardians, whereas Corpse Explosion is really good at clearing a screen. So if you're running in a group, you can kind of switch between the two if you have both items and just do what you see fit. But for the ring slot in the cube, we already talked about it. You probably will have a Ring of Royal Grandeur in there, or your Lornell Sunstone, or Unity, or your Kreisman Sentence. It just kind of depends on which one that you have is better to wear, and which one of those is better to be in the cube. For your legendary gems, the one that you'll want to run no matter what is Bane of the Trapped. It's just really good. It gives you a lot of damage bonus, and it's almost in every single build anyways. It's very, very good. The other two gems are very flexible. Like the bracers, you'll want to use whatever you actually need. So personally, I needed a more damage reduction, so what I ran was Esoteric Alteration. This is a very good gem for Trag'Oul's because of the secondary effect, which is while below half health, your resistances to cold, fire, lightning, poison, and arcane are increased by 75%. And running Trag'Oul's, you're almost always under half health, so it is a very good gem. I also suggest using Gogok of Swiftness. The attack speed and the dodge are okay. The dodge is nice for the additional damage reduction, but what you want it for is the cooldown reduction. The 15% additional cooldown reduction is fantastic. But you could easily swap this out for a Bane of the Stricken or whatever other type of gem that you want. Honestly, the cooldown reduction I value a lot because this build relies a lot on a combo, and if you can get that combo up more often, it's very good. But if you need more damage reduction or you need more single target damage boosting, then you just switch this gem out with whatever you see fit. So let's talk skills now. Obviously, you're going to run Corpse Explosion or Corpse Lance based on whichever one. If you're running Corpse Explosion, you use Final Embrace, which is the blood rune. It costs health anytime you use it, but that's what goes along with Trag'Oul's set. And the best part about this is while you actually click the skill on a thing of corpses, so you got to know where the corpses are, which can be difficult if you have a lot of enemies on the screen. You got to look for wherever your golem is and then kind of click in his general area. when you click on the corpses, they'll get up off the ground and run toward the targets and explode, which is really, really nice. It means that you don't necessarily have to be nearby the corpses, and you can use corpses that are far away to come and move towards the enemies. If you use Corpse Lance instead of Corpse Explosion, you run with Blood Lance. It's just a really high single target damage ability. Again, it costs your health, but it does a lot of damage. Like most other builds, you're also going to be using Bone Armor, and in our case, we're going to use Dislocation, which stuns all enemies hit for 2 seconds. This is part of a combo. We'll talk about the combo when we get to the gameplay, but it is just a very good skill. It provides damage reduction, and it provides a pretty nice damage boost with the combo. That said, if you are in a group that has a lot of stuns already, and you don't need to run this, you could run Thy Flesh Sustained, which just increases your life per second by essentially 100%. It costs a pretty big chunk of health, but that can be mitigated through one of our passives. We'll run Decrepify, because if we're using Dainty's Binding, that's just one of the best curses to run. Any rune here does work. I think that 2 of them are very, very good. Either Wither, which increases the damage reduction to 40%, so essentially you're gaining 90% total between the two. I know that's not how the math works, but you're gaining 40% from Decrepify, and you're gaining 50% through Dainty's Binding. So it is a pretty nice damage boost, or damage reduction boost, if you're running Wither. Otherwise, it's just base 30% on Decrepify, so what you could do instead, and what I like to do sometimes, I mean, I guess it depends on whether you need the damage reduction or not, but I like to run Dizzying Curse, and it means that all enemies have a 10% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds if they have Decrepify on them, which again works really well with our said combo. Of course, we'll also be running Blood Rush. Any of the runes work. You literally get all of the runes for using Trag'Oul's. So all of the effects of the runes are really, really good, and it just makes it even better with the way that this build ends up working. You'll want to use Command Golem with the Flesh Golem. That will be where we're getting most of our corpses at any given time, which is really good. And then finally, you'll run Land of the Dead. Any of the runes work, but the one that I suggest is using Frozen Lands. So when you use Land of the Dead, everything around you while Land of the Dead is active will just be frozen, which is very, very good in a lot of different scenarios. Not only does it proc our combo, but it also just means that you can use it to not die in some scenarios. You'll primarily be using this weapon to kill Rift Guardians and rare groups, though. There are a lot of different passives that you can run. Many of them are very, very good. The ones that I suggest, though, are Life from Death. Life from Death, anytime that you consume a corpse, you have a 20% chance to spawn a health globe. And because you are using your health as a resource, you'll want a consistent way to heal yourself. And this is a very consistent way to do that. And to combo off of that, we want to run Blood for Blood. Picking up a health globe removes the health cost of your next blood spell, and it can stack up to 10 times. So as long as you're picking up health globes, which you will be doing a lot of, you will be making sure that when you use Corpse Explosion or Corpse Lance, it's not just draining your HP immediately. And then we're also using Standalone, which I find is very, very powerful. Increases your armor by 100%, reduced by 10% for each active minion, and in our case, we only have 1 active minion, so increases armor by 90% is still very, very powerful. On top of that, we're using Blood is Power, which after pretty much losing 100% of your health, your max health, all ability cooldowns are reduced by 20%, but this can only affect the cooldown once. That means that if you, say, have Land of the Dead on cooldown, you lose a total of 100% of your maximum life, then that cooldown is reduced by 20%, but until it goes on cooldown again, it can't benefit from Blood is Power. What I find is really good about Blood is Power is it makes sure that our Command Golem cooldown and our Bone Armor cooldown are almost always up. Now, of course, you can mix and match whatever passives you want, but these are the passives that I find does really well with this build. Now let's talk about the gameplay. So as I said at the beginning, this is a high skill cap build. It is going to require a lot of practice, and in fact, I don't have a lot of practice with this build. I feel like I can get much better at it. It's just one of those situations where it's going to require a lot of time and effort put into it because you have to track so many different things, but that's part of what makes this build a lot of fun, is it's not completely brain dead and it requires a lot of thinking in the middle of a lot of chaos. So in order to make correct choices while playing this build, we have to know how the Dragool set works. There's a couple different things that are nuances with it. First and foremost, the 2-set bonus, we gain the effect of every rune on our Blood Rush, which is really, really good. The 4-set bonus, while at full health, the healing from all of our skills is added to our max health for 45 seconds, up to 100% more max health, which is great. It means that you're going to have a massive health pool. What people see with that is because you have a massive health pool and you're spending percentage of health to cast abilities, it means that you're spending huge amounts of HP in order to cast abilities. And while that's true, our effective HP is still massive. So even if we get hit with a melee attack, we're not just going to get one shot most of the time. And using Lornell's Sunstone when we're low on health, the amount of damage we're taking from a normal hit is significantly reduced, plus our amount of HP that we have. Like, let's say we are at 20% HP, we still have more health than most people in the game with whatever build they're running. Plus, we're gaining a massive damage reduction based on that, unless you're running Unity, which is more consistent across the board. With the 6-set bonus, your life-spending abilities deal 3,300% increased damage, but cost twice as much life. So instead of our 2% from our Corpse Explosion, Corpse Lance, it's using 4%, which is fine. Again, that's not a big deal for us, especially in conjunction with Blood for Blood, the passive that makes it so it doesn't actually cost any as long as you're picking up health globes, which is fairly often. And on top of that, your healing from skills is increased by 100%. And with Blood Rush, there is a really nice rune. Essentially, you heal for 2% of your max health for every enemy that you pass through. So if you Blood Rush across a group of enemies, going through all of them, you heal for a huge chunk of HP. If you are at max health, you're gaining the stacks from the 4-set bonus, so you're gaining more max health. And with using all of the health globes that are nearby, that'll keep you closer to full health. And when you're using Blood for Blood, you're not actually spending that health. So it's kind of a strange choice that you have to make of when you're spending health and getting low on HP and when you're healing yourself back up. There is a bit of a ramp time with the damage reduction on this, essentially, because you want to get that 100% additional max health as quickly as possible at the start of a rift, or when you die, you want to get that back as quickly as possible. If you have a lot of enemies to pass through, you can do this on 1 or 2 blood rushes. You also want to just be blood rushing almost always on cooldown to gain the armor buff, which is very good. And you want to just be making sure that you're healing up anytime you do that. So anytime you're low on HP, you don't necessarily have to hit your potion. You can actually blood rush through a huge group of enemies. You pick up all of the health globes that were in that area. So you kind of want to like blood rush 2 health globes, which heals you up for more. And if you are at max health, you gain the stacks. So you can easily get to 100% additional health very easily if you kind of know what you're doing. So we're using blood rush to heal ourselves and to get our 4-set bonus stacked up. Then there is a really powerful combo that we're trying to pull off between Decrepify, Bone Armor, and our Golem. So essentially what we do is we get a group of enemies together, and then we curse them all. We want to put that curse on them that gives us a 200% damage increase from the Dragool's weapon. Once they're grouped up, you launch your Golem into the middle of them. So not only will that put down a ton of corpses right in the center of them, but it also makes sure that he's going to be generating corpses right in the center of them, which is obviously very good. Then we blood rush in to the middle of them. I know that sounds risky, but immediately after blood rushing in, you bone armor, which stuns them all. Now you're getting the quad damage bonus from your Crisbin Sentence, plus the 200% damage bonus from the Dragools because of the curse. And then right as soon as you go into the middle and stun, that's when you spam your Corpse Explosion. That will kill everything in a huge area, and it's an incredibly powerful damage boost in a little burst situation. And that is why cooldown reduction is very important for this build, because by making sure that you have your command golem up with your bone armor, that means that you'll be able to do that combo more often. You'll be able to clear an entire screen of enemies more often. It's also very helpful to pick up the health globes while you're doing this, so that way you're not actually spending the health when you cast your ability. And on top of that, it may seem really risky to jump into the middle of everything at low health, but at the same time, you're gaining a huge damage reduction while doing it. So being low health isn't necessarily a bad thing. You don't always want to be full health because then you're at a higher risk of dying. So keep yourself like mid health, and I think you'll find a lot more success in that than always being topped off. So you might be asking yourself, when do you use Land of the Dead? You can kind of use it whenever you want, but you'll get the most effect out of it when you use it on a rare group. You'll want to get things grouped up first and foremost, so you kind of get things grouped up, then you curse them, and then you're going to do a similar combo where you jump in and then you Land of the Dead, and you just corpse explosion all of the rare elites at the same time if you can. I don't do this very well. It's one of the things that I need to practice a bit, is getting things grouped up. But if you're running in a party and you have something like a support monk, for example, they're going to do a very good job of getting everything grouped up for you. So all you'll really have to concern yourself with is hitting that Land of the Dead when there's a rare group or rare groups, and then just blowing them up. Especially with the Frozen Lands rune on Land of the Dead. That will make sure that you're getting the stun effect from that, which is getting Cryspin Sentence all buffed out. There's also a couple of other things to note if you're running Greater Rifts, especially if you're going solo or if you're in a group. Juggernaut is something you just skip over. If something has Juggernaut, you're not going to be able to stun them or slow them, so they are not getting a huge damage boost on them. Don't fight them. Just run. Just go to a different thing. Shielding is also very bad because it means that things get staggered deaths, and that is very bad for this. So shielding is another thing that you can pretty much skip over. When it comes to Greater Rift Guardians, you want things that have a lot of adds. So our best Greater Rift Guardian for the Corpse Explosion build, for example, is Hamlin, because he just has so many things that he spawns that you can do a ton of damage to them just by spending all those corpses. So it is essentially like using Land of the Dead, right? Which is one of our most powerful abilities, except you're not actually having to use it. So Hamlin is definitely by far the easiest one to do. Whereas if you're looking at something that is a single target Greater Rift Guardian, then Corpse Lance becomes much better. So if you're running the Corpse Lance build, killing the Greater Rift Guardians quickly without any adds is ideal for you. But if you're running Corpse Explosion, you want a Greater Rift Guardian that has a ton of adds. I believe if I practice this a lot more, which I'm going to do because I actually really enjoy this build, I think it's unique and nobody's running it, which is always fun. And if I get good gear, which again will come in time with just practicing the build, I believe that I could do a 95 with this pretty comfortably. I think anything over that, it's going to get a little iffy, but this build scales very, very well with density, and as you get higher in the Greater Rifts, you're naturally going to have more density because things aren't dying as quickly. So I think this will be a very powerful build. It'd be very, very good towards the top end, and people who are better at the games than I am and can play a very high skill cap build will be able to push this maybe even further than I think I could. So as I said at the beginning, it may not be the best build in the world, but it's close enough to make it so it's worth it to play. And honestly, if you have the Trag'Oul set at the beginning of a season, then why not run this thing and try to get it to work, especially if you have to get all the other pieces in order to get one of the best builds to work. I think this is a nice alternative in a world where currently at the start of the Necromancer launch, there's a lot of really boring builds out there, and this changes it up a bit and adds something that is super high skill cap. Let me know in the comments what you do to alter this build, or how you end up playing it, or any of the different types of experiences you've had running this build, because I always love learning what other people are doing and making adjustments on my own builds because of that. But with that being said, we shall see you guys next time.